Hello there. The great cyberneticist Dr. Noonien Soong was the man responsible primarily for the development of one of the greatest AIs and Starfleet officers within Federation history. A man whose very existence owed itself to the previous developments and attempts to create the perfect organism. The Soong family had spent generations attempting to achieve this goal, in the early days using genetics and then later cybernetics. In this instance, with Data, they did succeed, but it was a process to get there. The earlier prototypes before Data, to give Soong his credit for his interesting naming conventions, were Lore, 2 unknown prototypes, and of course B4. B4 was a very, very basic positronic Soong type android, still created in the same physical image as its creator, Dr. Noonien Soong, but this particular individual was not as cognitively developed as his 2 younger siblings, or even his human biological brother. What we're going to learn about today is just who and what he was, what we know about his history and his ultimate fate. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and please hit the bell notification icon if you want to keep up to date with this series and any episodes from this channel, as you know, that's the real subscribe button, because quite frankly YouTube's algorithm is weird, and if you subscribe to something it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get notifications about it. You actually have to watch the episodes or hit the bell in order to be reminded that they exist. With that out of the way though, let's get started on the conversation about B4. B4 was developed at some point during or prior to, around the date of the 2330s. His exact date of construction is not known, but it was some point in the 2330s most likely. He was the 3rd in a line of advanced androids created by his father, Dr. Noonien Soong, and his mother, Juliana Tainer, or Juliana Soong as she was at the time. B4 was a basic android, with only a limited ability and scope for his mental and cognitive development. In fact, you could make a reasoned argument that all of the Soong androids are reflections of a different spectrum of personality, with Data, quite frankly, being kind of autistic, Lore being a sociopath, not that that's a good spectrum to be on, but you know, he's there, and B4 having clear learning difficulties. Now, each one of these androids was unique and distinct, with only Lore being effectively evil and the others being quite passive. B4 was unwittingly evil, but we'll get to that, and I'd say I use the word evil probably a bit harshly there, but nonetheless. Just before we carry on, and to interrupt, well, me, we bring you a little word from my sponsor, an older sponsor, but you know, returning all the same. That would be Relentless Rebels. Relentless Rebels do Viking style jewelry, something that you might be able to tell from my, you know, less than non-Viking appearance. A lot of the times is something that I rather embrace, and not really a personal choice, it's just kind of evolved that way. All the same, they do Viking style stuff that varies from jewelry to clothing, as well as some of their own brand and a variety of other similar items that you'll find on their website. If you go to their website and decide that you want to try and buy anything, if you use the promo code NERD20, that is NERD20 all in capitals, you will get a 20% discount on all of your purchases, and it's free shipping. It's worth a try if that's the kind of thing that you think might be of interest to you. If you do, check out the link below, go to the website, use the promo code, get yourself a bargain, and find yourself some rather nice things. Now, back to the video. We're going for it. He was deactivated upon learning as much as he could from his son in the development of his next stage android, which will be Lore. B4 was a stepping stone to what would be the fully cognitive and self-aware androids that came after him. But without this vital step, Lore and Data and the subsequent ones that came after them, such as Juliana, Lull, and an even entire race of androids, would not have been possible. Now, B4 demonstrated a curiosity and interest in the world around him. He was pleasant, harmless, polite, kind, well-mannered as best as he could be, and did demonstrate that he wanted to learn and he wanted to understand, but simply didn't understand or know why things were happening around him. It was simply beyond his ability to reason and comprehend. Basic functions, levels of conversation, but his most famous saying would basically be, why? Which was his constant questioning of others. The conversation between him and his brother after they first met, where he constantly asked Data why they're running from the enemy, why are the enemy firing at them, why are they going, and Data just answering him, sort of speaks to my early statements of Data being a little autistic and B4 having severe learning difficulties. But he was an affectionate and compassionate individual that, despite his simplicity and basic understanding of the world around him, did choose and want to be good and didn't want to do harm, especially to his brother as he saw him. B4 was physically, as far as we can tell, identical to Data. As I've stated before, the construction of the android body didn't seem to be particularly challenging to Soong, and there's no evidence that there's much, if any, difference between the physical makeup of his sons in B4 lore and Data. Their bodies may have been anatomically identical with only subtle differences perhaps, but all that said, it was in the mind, the positronic brain itself, where we really see the difference. B4 was disassembled upon the construction of lore beginning. Realizing that he had achieved all that he could achieve and could go no further, Noonien sort of decided to progress without B4's continued presence. Harsh decision perhaps, but he'd already done this 2 previous times. Later, however, B4 would somehow end up in the hands of Shinzon of Remus. And we're going to circle back to this point shortly. But Shinzon would use the disassembled parts with some modifications, adding an additional secondary memory port, which would superficially seem like, because of his limited scope of mental cognitive capabilities, a second memory port for redundancy was necessary. It was not. This port was added, as far as we can tell, by the Riemann to hide subversive programming into B4. B4 was basically a sleeper agent, one they knew they wouldn't mistrust, as he was a spitting image of Data and Data's brother. And it was basically so that the Riemann, and by extension the Romulans, could learn as much as they can about Federation ship deployments and security measures protecting Earth and the Federation, allowing Shinzon to attack Earth with the scimitar. Luckily this was detected by Data, but that's not really relevant to this. B4 was scattered upon Caloris 3, an inhabited, although somewhat unpleasant planet, but his little bits and pieces were scattered everywhere and they went searching for them. Picard was the first to quickly note that something didn't feel quite right about this. How did he end up there? To be honest, as a point, because of the pace of what was happening in the grander scheme of things happening around them, it was a little bit put to the wayside as to how B4 ended up scattered in pieces all over the planet. He was reassembled, however, aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701E, and they would attempt to sort of communicate with him and help him learn. Data would go as far as to transfer his own memories to B4 in the hope that it would sort of jumpstart his learning capability, or maybe give him a little bit more of a head start than where he was. There's no evidence that this actually aided B4 in any way. He simply was who he was. His positronic net was not capable of handling the amount of data, pun intended, that he was given, and information that was dumped on him. Although he did demonstrate certain personality quirks, and he certainly had access to some of the memories after Data's sad death, but Data and B4 were very different people, and B4 was never going to be able to really live up. This was something Noonien had known. Nonetheless, he was still an individual and with rights. Upon the Enterprise's return to the Federation, by the 2390s, B4 had been disassembled and was in pieces at the Daystrom Institute for Cybernetics, where they were studying him to build the other androids that would eventually be part of the synth uprising of 2399. Meaning B4 was effectively the progenitor of an entire race of at least basic synth androids, soon type positronic net androids, that were in service across the Federation, but most notably on Mars, helping in the construction of Federation resources and starships and materials being produced in the huge factories and industries on Mars for distribution across the Federation. So, he had a legacy. I'd say his most important legacy was Data. And I know B4 didn't have anything directly to do with the production of either data or the synths that came after him that were based upon him. He did, however, be the template for these things. So he mattered, and he was meaningful. Now, I want to circle back to my original point about Shinzon of Remus having B4. First of all, it's never really explained in Alpha Canon in any way. I'm actually not sure if it's ever explained in Beta Canon, because I don't usually follow Beta Canon too closely. But to my knowledge, and, there's nothing. There's no explanation really as to how Shinzon got him. We can assume he bought him. Maybe he was salvaged from where data was originally produced. But, to be honest, we can sort of put that by the by. The Romulans are pretty resourceful. At some point I can see the Romulans going looking, and maybe they stumbled upon him. Maybe, like Data, he was left in a cavern, like Lore was, like Data was, on the planet where the crystalline entity was destroyed the planet. So it's conceivable the Romulans simply found him, and he ended up at Shinzon's door somehow. But my better question is, now that we know that behind the Tal Shiar, behind the Romulan government, there's a secret organization we now know as the Jacques Vache. The Romulans are deathly afraid of advanced AI machines. And although B4, by no measurable standard compared to his brothers and his mother, was anywhere near as sophisticated an android, he was very advanced. And so from a Romulan point of view, especially from the point of view of the Jacques Vache, he represented everything that they feared. Just as much as Data, he may have been less advanced, but the potential was there. The potential to build more, the potential to replicate him, which is what the Federation went and did. So why then would they have tolerated his presence on Remus or on Romulus in any way? Now, again, I am making an assumption that it wasn't Shinzon that found B4. That it wasn't the Reman that found him in some way. Or he wasn't brought to Shinzon after Shinzon took power in some way. That he already was on Romulus or somewhere within the Romulan Empire before Shinzon took power. I am making that assumption. But I think it's a reasonable one, because I don't think there were many steps between Shinzon taking power and him laying the seeds of a trap for Captain Picard and the Enterprise using B4. He had to have time to modify him, come up with the idea, scatter his parts on the planet, and then make sure that the Enterprise detected the positronic signature of B4's mind. So why did the Jacques Vache put up with this? Why did they tolerate it? And I know that we could say because Shinzon was very powerful, he was influential, he could have killed loads of them. But we know that the Jacques Vache were pulling the strings behind a lot of things, behind the Romulan government. If he needed support of the Romulan military, the Tal Shiar, and those things. Now we know the Tal Shiar was a bit on its knees since the Dominion War. There's a lot of ways out, but I'm going to put it to you guys. How exactly, knowing what we know retroactively, how did he get away with even having B4 on Romulus or Remus to be used in any way? I can see how the Jacques Vache might have overlooked him utilizing B4 as a weapon, but him being there for study, him being there for modification, him being there in any way as a presence, is a bit of a stretch. It is very sad though. The ultimate fate of B4 was to be in pieces, disassembled and deactivated at the Daystrom Institute. That's sad, but quite frankly, although he was, I would have considered B4 a sentient being, I think it was understandable, especially with after the synth attack, why they would simply disassemble him. He never really, Data was given rights. Lore was even recognized as having rights. Why then the Federation didn't quite recognize B4 in the same way and they felt it was simply, you can disassemble him, might have simply been because he wasn't fully cognizant. But as I used my earlier analogy, if the three brothers represent three different states of mind, as in, as I say, psychopathy or sociopathy, being severely autistic, which basically Data was, and then having some kind of severe learning difficulties, which B4 seemed to represent. That's like saying that because you got learning difficulties, your rights don't matter as much, and that's more of a stretch for me with the Federation. Can't quite buy that. However, again, for whatever reason, the steps were taken that he ended up there. It could have simply been that he was seen as little more than one step above a normal computer system, because he wasn't truly all there, and he was synthetic, not a living being. I don't know, it's an ethical debate, probably above my pay grade. But we're here at the end of this video now, at the life of B4. A remarkable android, stepping stone to something better perhaps, but doesn't diminish from the person that he was, in my opinion. He had every right to exist, and I'm sure Picard believed the same thing, and Data certainly did. He wanted to help his brother as much as he could. B4 might not have done the same thing, Lore rather, sorry, but nonetheless, gotta respect the man he was. If that's all he was capable of being, then that's all he was capable of being, and that's okay. But again, we're at the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed this. If you made it all the way to the end and you did enjoy it, hit the bell notification icon, because as of right now with the uploading of this, there will be more of these episodes of the Soong family coming, because I've still got to cover Lore, got to cover Data, got to cover Alton and others as part of the extensive Soong family still to come, as well as a great deal more Star Trek videos in the past and in the future of this episode. So with that said, thank you for watching, and bye bye. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now, and in the description box below there are links to my other social media accounts.